I fucked a Centaurus. By Lisa Fay. Chapter 1. After trudging through the dense, labyrinthine forest, where ancient trees twisted their gnarled branches into a near impenetrable canopy, I finally emerged into the clearing. The light that spilled into this open expanse was almost mythical, its brilliance more radiant than anything I had seen before. It wasn't sunlight as I knew it, this light seemed alive, a golden essence that danced upon the grass and kissed the leaves with a gentle shimmer. The air itself felt different here, as if imbued with an ancient magic that hummed softly around me, tickling my skin and filling my lungs with a sense of awe and serenity. Before me lay the Centauri land, a realm I had only heard about in whispers and half-forgotten tales. It stretched out like a vision from a dream, a meadow so pristine it seemed untouched by time or mortal hands. Rolling hills dipped and rose in a perfect rhythm, their lush green grasses swaying gently as though moved by the breath of the land itself. Streams of crystal clear water wound through the fields like silver veins, and wild flowers of every imaginable color dotted the landscape, their delicate petals glowing softly in the light. And then I saw him. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shimmering light, a mirage conjured by the enchantment of this sacred place. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized the figure standing amidst the meadow was real, more real than anything I had ever encountered. He was a Centaurus, but calling him that felt inadequate. He was a masterpiece of both man and stallion, a perfect union of grace, power, and ethereal beauty. His upper body was sculpted to perfection, each muscle defined yet not overbearing, his broad shoulders tapering to a torso that spoke of strength honed not just by nature, but by purpose. His long, golden blonde hair flowed like molten sunlight, cascading over his shoulders and catching the light with every subtle motion. It framed a face that could have been carved from marble by the gods themselves, a strong jawline that exuded an air of nobility, hazelnut eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries, and lips that carried the faintest curve of both warmth and authority. The lower half of his body was no less extraordinary. From his waist down, he was the embodiment of equine majesty, his stallion's form gleaming with a coat so radiant it seemed to have been spun from threads of gold. The golden hide glistened in the magical light, every ripple of muscle beneath it moving with a power and grace that left me spellbound. His tail was a darker shade of gold, harmonizing perfectly with the sunlit hue of his hair, and it swayed gently with each slight movement, as though it had a life of its own. His hooves, pristine and smooth, gleamed like polished ivory, their delicate appearance belying the strength they held. He stood tall and proud, an aura of calm confidence enveloping him, as though he was as much a part of this land as the streams and the hills. When he moved, it was as if the earth itself bent to his will, the grass whispering beneath his hooves and the air parting gently to let him pass. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. In the presence of such magnificence, it felt as though time itself had paused, waiting for him to acknowledge my existence. My heart thundered in my chest, not out of fear, but from the sheer overwhelming awe of being in the presence of a creature so divine, so impossibly perfect, that he could only belong to a world far beyond my own. The moment I stepped into the clearing, the enchantment of the place wrapped around me like a dream made real, but my reverie was short-lived. As my eyes fixed on him, the Centaurus, his gaze locked onto mine with an intensity that froze me in place. His hazelnut eyes, so warm and deep moments ago, now seemed hardened, a storm brewing within them. He moved toward me, each step deliberate, the sound of his ivory hooves striking the soft earth resonating like distant thunder. The fluid motion of his golden stallion body was hypnotic, and for a fleeting moment, I thought he might be some kind of savior or protector of this sacred land. But as he drew closer, the tension in the air grew heavier, thick with something I couldn't quite name. When he stopped just a few strides away, towering over me, I saw the faint twitch of his jaw, the set of his lips pulled into a line of displeasure. Then he spoke, his voice rough and edged, like the scrape of steel against stone. "Are you lost? My name is Zephyr and I am this land's protector." His question was sharp, cutting through the serene beauty of the meadow like a blade. I opened my mouth to respond, but he didn't wait for my answer. "You don't belong here," he continued, his tone laced with both warning and disdain. "These are not lands for mortals to wander freely." His hazelnut eyes swept over me, assessing, but there was no kindness in his gaze now, only the hard edge of suspicion. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, but I held my ground, refusing to look away. There was something in his presence, in the way the golden light seemed to dim slightly around him, that made me realize the seriousness of his words. This wasn't just idle scorn. He truly believed I was an intruder, a trespasser on sacred ground. "You should turn back," he said, his voice dropping lower, rougher, as if the weight of the words strained him. "Leave this place before you awaken something that cannot be undone." His warning was not a suggestion, it was a command, spoken with the authority of someone who had lived lifetimes longer than my own. Yet beneath the hardness of his tone, there was a flicker of something else, doubt, perhaps, or curiosity, as if he couldn't quite decide what to make of me. I swallowed hard, the dry lump in my throat a stark reminder of how vulnerable I was in his presence. But even as my instincts screamed at me to heed his warning, to turn and run back into the safety of the forest, I knew I couldn't. Something had drawn me here, something beyond my understanding, and I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Chapter 2. I began, but my voice faltered, the words caught in the tangle of emotions swirling within me. Zephyr's gaze narrowed, and for the briefest of moments, I thought I saw a flicker of frustration, or perhaps intrigue, flash across his features. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced once more by the stern, commanding presence of the guardian who now stood between me and the heart of the Centauri land. Zephyr's piercing gaze didn't waver, but his brow furrowed slightly as silence stretched between us. His tone grew sharper, more probing, as he took a step closer, his towering form casting a faint shadow over me. "Did you speak?" he asked, his voice a low, commanding rumble that seemed to vibrate in the very air around us. "Do you even hear what I say?" His frustration was palpable, but beneath it, there was an undeniable curiosity. I felt his eyes on me, studying me as though he were trying to decipher a riddle. His gaze moved slowly, deliberately, tracing over every inch of me, from the top of my head to the tips of my boots. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat as his scrutiny lingered on my face. There was a shift in his expression, subtle yet unmistakable, as his eyes rested on my hair. My long, bright red locks tumbled over my shoulders, catching the golden light of the clearing like flames dancing in the breeze. His gaze softened for a fleeting moment, as if the fiery strands intrigued him. Then his eyes met mine again, and I saw something flicker within those hazelnut depths. Perhaps it was the amazement he couldn't quite hide as he took in the vivid green of my eyes, wide and shimmering with wonder at the beauty of the land around me. "What is your name?" he asked finally, his voice quieter now but no less firm. The edge had dulled, replaced by something more measured, though the undercurrent of suspicion remained. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest, and forced myself to speak, though my voice trembled slightly. "Garina," I said, the single word feeling almost insignificant in the presence of this magnificent creature. Zephyr's lips pressed into a line, his brow furrowing as he turned the name over in his mind. "Garina," he repeated, his deep voice wrapping around the syllables like a foreign melody. Then his eyes narrowed, the sharpness returning to his tone. "What do you want, Garina? Why are you here? What do you seek in these lands?" His questions were direct, each one delivered like a challenge, but I found myself unable to answer. It wasn't that I didn't have a reason, I did, though I wasn't yet sure I could put it into words. Instead, I felt an inexplicable pull, a sense that I had been drawn here by something greater than myself. My silence seemed to agitate him, but he said nothing more, watching me closely. My hands trembled as I hesitated, then slowly, with a mixture of fear and fascination, I reached out. My fingers moved of their own accord, driven by a need to bridge the impossible gap between us. Zephyr's muscles tensed as my hand hovered just above the golden sheen of his stallion's flank. His gaze snapped to mine, a warning flickering in his eyes, but he didn't move. My breath hitched, and I hesitated, my fingers trembling with both awe and trepidation. Finally, I let them fall, brushing lightly against the warm, silken coat of his lower body. The sensation was unlike anything I had ever felt. His hide was impossibly smooth, radiating a gentle warmth, as if the sunlight itself had been captured within his form. My touch was hesitant, feather-light, but even as fear twisted in my chest, I couldn't bring myself to pull away. Zephyr's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening as if he were weighing whether to allow this fragile moment or to put an end to it. His voice, when he spoke again, was quieter but no less commanding. "Careful," he murmured, his tone a low growl. "You tread on dangerous ground, mortal." But despite the warning, he didn't move away. Instead, he remained still, watching me with an intensity that made my pulse race, as though he were trying to decide whether I was bold, foolish, or something else entirely. Zephyr's eyes never left mine, even as my hand rested against the golden warmth of his flank. My pulse quickened, though whether from his presence or my own boldness, I couldn't say. I cleared my throat, trying to find my voice, though it wavered slightly as I spoke. "Can I ride you?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how he'd respond. His expression shifted, surprise flashing across his features before something far more mischievous settled there. A slow, wicked smile tugged at his lips, softening the sharpness of his jaw and revealing a glint of white teeth. "If you return the favor," he said, his voice low and smooth, carrying a teasing edge that sent a jolt through me. He'd crept up my neck at his words, but I didn't falter. I met his gaze and gave a small nod, my lips curling into a hesitant smile of my own. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction, and his smile widened into something even more roguish. "Very well, then," he murmured, stepping closer. Without waiting for further agreement, he knelt slightly, lowering his golden body just enough to offer me a chance to climb atop him. I hesitated, my fingers brushing against his shoulder as I steadied myself. His skin was firm and warm beneath my touch, and I couldn't ignore the electric thrill that ran through me as he looked over his shoulder, his gaze meeting mine with an expression of both amusement and expectation. "Come on, Karina," he said, his tone laced with a playful impatience. "Or have you changed your mind already?" "Not a chance," I replied, steeling myself. With his guidance, I managed to climb onto his back, the combination of his human torso and powerful stallion body creating a balance that felt surreal and strangely natural. As I settled atop him, he rose to his full height, and I felt the ground fall away beneath me. The sensation was exhilarating, his movements smooth and effortless. "Hold tight," Zephyr instructed, glancing back at me with a knowing smirk. In response, I instinctively straddled him, gripping his sides with my legs and wrapping my arms around his broad torso. His muscles shifted beneath my touch, and I couldn't help but marvel at the sheer power and elegance of him. "Comfortable?" he asked, his voice laced with a teasing warmth. "Surprisingly, yes," I replied, feeling a flush rise to my cheeks. He chuckled softly, the sound rich and deep, and without another word, he began to move. Chapter 3. The ride was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Zephyr's stride was smooth yet powerful, his hooves making barely a sound as he carried us across the meadow. The golden light of the clearing seemed to follow him, casting a radiant glow around us as the wind whipped through my hair. The sensation of freedom, of flight, was overwhelming, and I found myself laughing softly, unable to contain the giddy joy bubbling up inside me. We climbed the gentle slope of a nearby hill, the grasses brushing against his golden hide and my legs. At the crest of the hill, he slowed, finally coming to a stop. The view before us was breathtaking, rolling fields stretching as far as the eye could see, dappled with the warm light of the Centauri land's eternal glow. Zephyr turned his head slightly, glancing back at me. "Enjoying yourself?" "I think enjoying might be an understatement," I admitted, my voice breathless from both the ride and the beauty surrounding us. He lowered himself just enough for me to slide off his back. His hands brushed my waist as he steadied me during the descent, the warmth of his touch lingering longer than necessary, or perhaps it was just my imagination. Once my feet touched the ground, I looked up at him, my breath catching in my chest at the way his hazelnut eyes seemed to glimmer in the golden light. His smirk returned, curling at the edges of his lips, but this time it was unmistakably mischievous, a spark of playfulness dancing in his gaze. "You can climb on top of that hay over there," he said, nodding toward a modest pile resting beneath a nearby tree. "It'll give you, me, a little height." I arched a brow at him, crossing my arms. "Claiming your payment so quickly?" My tone was light, teasing, but the flicker of heat in his expression made my heart flutter. "Why wait?" he replied smoothly, the edge of his voice laced with an almost sultry amusement that sent a shiver down my spine. The audacity of him made me laugh, a soft, breathy sound that felt foreign after everything I'd been through to get here. Yet it was impossible not to be swept up in the easy confidence with which he carried himself. With a small shake of my head, I turned and began making my way toward the hay pile, my steps measured, knowing he was watching every move. The feel of his gaze on me was palpable, his intensity like a physical force. "Enjoying the view?" I called over my shoulder, glancing back to catch him staring unabashedly. I perched on top of the hay, the height enough to bring me closer to his eye level, though he still towered over me slightly. He approached, his movements as fluid as the wind, his golden coat shimmering in the sunlight. When he reached me, his hands rested lightly on the hay bales, his gaze locking onto mine with a disarming intensity. "Comfortable up there?" he asked, his tone casual but his smirk betraying the playful edge beneath his words. "For now," I said, tilting my head slightly. "Though I have to admit, this arrangement feels a little one-sided." "Oh?" he murmured, stepping closer until the distance between us was almost non-existent. His voice dipped lower, his smirk softening into something more intimate. "Then perhaps we should even the scales." Before I could respond, one of his hands reached up, brushing a stray lock of my red hair back behind my ear. The touch was fleeting, barely there, but it sent a rush of warmth through me. "Your turn," he added, his hazelnut eyes searching mine, the challenge clear in his gaze. "Turn for what?" I asked, my voice softer now, though the teasing lilt remained. "To make the next move," he replied, his voice a low rumble, rich with anticipation. "Unless, of course, you're afraid to play." A spark ignited in me at his words, the flirtation between us a dance as natural as the wind rustling through the grass. I leaned slightly forward, my eyes narrowing playfully. "Afraid?" "Not even a little," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, letting the moment hang between us, thick with possibilities. Zephyr's smirk deepened, his expression equal parts admiration and challenge. "Good," he murmured. "Because I don't like cowards." He barely finished his sentence before I closed the space between us, my hands instinctively gripping the edge of the hay bale to steady myself as I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was fierce, ignited by a spark that flared into a consuming fire the moment our lips met. His initial surprise lasted only a heartbeat before he responded, his mouth moving against mine with equal fervor. His hands, strong and warm, rose to cradle my face, his thumbs brushing against my cheeks as though to keep me anchored to him. His touch sent a cascade of heat through me, a visceral sensation that seemed to melt any lingering hesitation. I could feel was the strength of him, the commanding way he took control of the kiss, deepening it as if daring me to match his intensity. His lips were firm yet impossibly soft, and the faint taste of something wild and unfamiliar lingered on them, intoxicating and exhilarating all at once. My fingers tangled in his golden hair, its silken strands slipping through my grasp like liquid sunlight. I could feel the taut power of his body, the way his chest pressed against mine as the kiss grew hungrier, more consuming. Every breath we shared felt charged, electrified by the palpable tension that had built between us from the moment we first locked eyes. My heart pounded wildly, its rhythm echoing in my ears, matching the intensity of his movements. When we finally broke apart, it wasn't with reluctance but with a breathless pause, as though the world itself demanded a moment to catch up. My lips tingled from the force of our exchange, and my breaths came quick and shallow as I looked at him. Zephyr's eyes burned with a flicker of something raw, untamed, but it was his smirk that caught me. Slowly, it crept across his face, that same infuriating, intoxicating expression, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment all along. "Been over," he said, his voice low, a whisper of thunder wrapped in silk, the words carrying a quiet command that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned my back to him, my breath hitching as I stepped toward the bale of hay. The golden threads of the dried grass felt coarse beneath my hands as I leaned forward, resting my weight against it. Every sound around us seemed to fade, the whisper of the wind through the trees, the rustling of leaves, all eclipsed by the sound of his steady breaths behind me. The moment stretched taut, heavy with anticipation. Zephyr's presence loomed closer, his warmth palpable against my back even before I felt the feather-light brush of his fingers against my hips. His touch was deliberate, as though savoring every second, and the faintest tug on the waistband of my trousers sent a jolt of awareness through me. He pulled them down slowly, the fabric sliding against my skin with a soft rasp, bearing me inch by inch to the cool air. His hands, warm and roughened by a life lived untamed, traced over the curve of my waist and down to my hips. Each touch was unhurried, exploring, the pads of his fingers skimming my skin with an exquisite tenderness that belied the strength I knew he possessed. "You're softer than I imagined," he murmured, his voice barely more than a breath. There was no mockery in his tone, only admiration, as though he were speaking more to himself than to me. He knelt slightly behind me, his movements deliberate, as his hands slid lower, mapping the contours of my thighs with a reverence that made my pulse race. The warmth of his palms contrasted with the cool air against my exposed skin, the combination igniting a fire that spread through me like liquid heat. Zephyr leaned closer, and I felt the faintest brush of his breath against the back of my neck. "Do you trust me, Karina?" he asked, his tone softer now, almost tender, as though the weight of the question mattered more than the moment itself. I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the edge of the hay for support as I found my voice. "I think I do," I whispered, though the tremor in my words betrayed the vulnerability coursing through me. His hand rose to rest against the small of my back, firm yet comforting, grounding me in the intensity of the moment. "Good," he said, his voice a blend of reassurance and promise. He didn't rush, didn't demand more. Instead, his hands continued their exploration between my legs, caressing my inner thigh with a sensuality that made every nerve come alive. His fingers found my clit and he started circling it rapidly. I left out a soft moan. With his other hand he gently parted my lips and slid his fingers inside. I shivered at the sensation. He increased his movements and moved closer to me. I could feel his hooves in the hay next to me. As his back straightened, the warmth of his golden coat brushed against my exposed skin, soft as velvet and yet imbued with the raw strength of his being. The sensation was both comforting and electric, sending a shiver through me that seemed to echo in the stillness of the clearing. He moved closer to position himself, the steady power of his body palpable against my back, each subtle shift of his frame a silent reminder of his primal grace. The contrast between his commanding presence and the gentleness of his touch made my pulse quicken. I felt his member brush against my skin and instinctively I arched more, higher. He placed his length between my legs, at the entrance his fingers were moments ago and he let it slide in slowly. I moaned harder as he kept sliding in. He started moving back and forth and my moans only deepened. I could see his front legs grounded at my shoulders. As he kept pushing himself harder and harder I looked over my shoulder and I could see his length entering me and gliding in and out but never completely. A single thought occurred in my mind: how long was he? As if he read my mind, he pulled it all out and now I could see it stand all high in its glory and it was at least half the length of his muscled big arms. I shifted slightly, to get a better view from this angle and I heard him say my name. "Garina." He paused. He advanced once again, his hooves stomping closer to me and I felt his length brush against my ass. He propped his cock atop of my rim and I gasped. With slow and deliberate movements, he inserted himself in. He kept pushing slowly and I took a deep breath, my mind stuck with the image of his big length and knowing what's to come. I let out a soft cry as he reached half in. He didn't say anything but I knew he heard me as his hooves stomped near my shoulder, not angrily but maybe as a gentle reassurance. I could feel his length all through my stomach and coming in more inch by inch. I let out a shriek as he pushed the last of him in more powerful than his previous movements. He started moving, increasing his thrusts and speed. I felt him move in my belly, not only my ass. He was strong and mighty and oh God, long. His cock started pulsing inside of me and I put one hand under me, studying my stomach. I could feel him in my palm, against the thick of my skin. He took it almost completely out only to slid it back inside in the depth of my stomach, filling me with his cum. Pressure gathered, and as my belly grew slightly larger, I could feel the liquid forcing itself out and dripping from my ass and onto the hay. His massive body collapsed into the hay beside me, and I rolled off the bale, laying at his side. Chapter 4. The warmth of him, even in the cool evening air, was undeniable. He turned to face me, one hand reaching out to gently trace the curve of my cheek. His touch was tender, but his golden eyes held a flicker of something more, something playful. "Did I hurt you?" he asked, his voice low, tinged with a hint of concern. "A little," I admitted with a soft smile, though the teasing edge in my tone made it clear I wasn't upset. "But I know how you can make it up to me." The corner of his mouth worked up into that familiar smirk. "Let me guess. You want to ride me, again?" I laughed, a light, breathy sound as I shook my head. "I had something else in mind," I replied, my gaze locked with his as I leaned in closer. "Something like you using your tongue?" For a moment, his expression was one of pure confusion, his brows knitting slightly. But then, as I shifted and positioned myself in front of him, spreading my legs just enough to hint at my meaning, the realization dawned. The faintest hint of surprise flickered across his face before it was replaced by a slow, knowing grin. "So, what do you say?" I asked, my voice laced with teasing confidence as I tilted my head. "Should I take them off?" I motioned toward my pants, a playful glint in my eye. Zephyr let out a soft laugh, his gaze raking over me with that maddening mix of amusement and intrigue. "Look who's demanding payment now," he drawled, his tone as smooth as silk. "Payment?" I asked, feigning innocence as I raised a brow. "Think of it as me offering you a treat." My lips curved into a smirk to match his, my voice light but daring. He leaned forward slightly, his golden hair falling into his eyes as his smirk deepened. "Well, if you put it that way, how could I ever refuse?" he murmured. His tone was almost a purr, sending a shiver down my spine. His eyes flicked downward briefly, then back to mine, and the playful challenge in his expression was unmistakable. "Now," he continued, "are you going to take them off, or do you need a hand?" The pants fall away in an instant, leaving me bare before him. I settle onto a bale of hay, spreading my legs wide, invitingly. He steps closer, his breath warm against my thighs, sending shivers across my skin. Softly, he begins trailing kisses along my inner thigh, each one slow and deliberate, moving steadily upward. His lips pause just shy of the most sensitive spot, and he teases, "Like this?" The vibration of his words against me makes me shudder, a quiet gasp escaping my lips. He chuckles softly, the sound resonating through me, drawing another involuntary moan. My hand moves instinctively to his hair, fingers tangling in his golden strands as I press him closer. His tongue explores me, gliding with precision, wriggling side to side, and I arch forward, my body yearning for more. He shifts his focus, circling my clit with deliberate speed, his movements quickening. "Don't stop," I breathe, my voice trembling. His lips seal over me, alternating between gentle suction and rapid flicks of his tongue, sending waves of sensation coursing through me. My breath quickens, my body tensing as the intensity builds to its peak. So close. With a final burst of pressure and precision, the release overtakes me, my body surrendering completely as a loud, unrestrained moan escapes my lips. As I melted into his arms, my cheek pressed against his solid chest, his voice broke through the comforting haze. "It will soon be dark. I should take you back," he said softly, yet with a tone that left no room for argument. His words jolted me out of my reverie. I tilted my head to look up at him, confusion flashing across my face. "Back where?" "To the clearing," he said simply, as if the answer was obvious. He paused, his hazelnut eyes meeting mine with a fleeting shadow of hesitation, then added, "So, you can go back, from where you came." I blinked, the weight of his words crashing over me like a cold wave. "Back? First of all, what makes you think I want to go back, especially now, after I faltered, the words catching in my throat before I forced them out. We. He raised a brow but said nothing, so I pressed on. Secondly, as you yourself pointed out, it's getting dark. There's no way I could cross the forest that surrounds this place safely, or, more to the point, alive. He stood up, a fluid motion that betrayed the strength in his towering frame. His expression softened slightly, though a hint of exasperation lingered at the edges. Then we should find shelter before night creeps in, he said, his voice steady and practical. He lowered himself onto his forelegs, motioning for me to climb onto his back. I crossed my arms, feigning nonchalance. Free ride? I asked teasingly, a smirk playing on my lips. Just shut up and climb already, he shot back, though there was a spark of amusement in his tone. I obliged, swinging myself up with his assistance, and as his powerful body rose beneath me, I instinctively tightened my grip around him, straddling his back. Chapter 5. The moment his candor began, smooth and swift, I held on tightly, my legs pressed firmly against the warm, golden fur of his lower half. He didn't stop, didn't look back, his focus set entirely on the path ahead. When we reached a thundering waterfall, its cascade shimmering in the waning light, he finally broke the silence. We need to get to the other side, he called over the deafening roar. And to do so means getting wet, he added. I adjusted my grip, my hands tangling in the strands of his mane. Stroking him gently with my heels, I gave an encouraging nudge. He leapt without hesitation, diving straight through the torrent of icy water. The cold hit us like a slap, the spray soaking us instantly. My gasp was lost in the sound of the falls, but as we landed on the other side, now standing in a small cavern behind the curtain of water, relief and exhilaration coursed through me. Are you okay? He asked, shaking droplets from his golden coat. Cold and wet, but otherwise fine, I replied, suppressing a shiver. Hold tight, he instructed, his voice more commanding now. We still have a bit farther to go. He moved deeper into the cavern, his hooves echoing softly against the stone. When we finally stopped in a sheltered corner, he helped me dismount, his hands firm yet careful as he guided me down. Wrapping my arms around myself, I rubbed them, trying in vain to warm my chilled skin. He sat on the cavern floor, tucking his hooves beneath him, and opened his arms in invitation. Come here, he said softly, the warmth in his tone a stark contrast to the cold air around us. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer and letting him pull me into his embrace. His arms wrapped securely around me, his chest radiating a heat that began to chase away the chill even if not entirely. I relaxed against him, grateful for the comfort of his touch. You're shivering, he murmured, his voice close to my ear. And why do you care? I shot back, a hint of defiance creeping into my tone. You wanted me gone just moments ago. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, keeping me close. Don't be like this, he whispered, his voice almost pleading. I didn't want you gone. Not now. He paused, his words hanging heavy in the air. How so? I snapped, sharper than I intended, but his cryptic answers were beginning to frustrate me. I really enjoyed our little. He hesitated, searching for the right word. Escapade atop the hill. A laugh burst from me, surprising even myself. Escapade atop the hill? I repeated, amusement softening my irritation. He smirked, his confidence returning. I'm just saying, you're different from what I expected a human to be. I tilted my head to look at him. Have you encountered many? A dozen or so, he admitted. But none like you. Care to elaborate? His gaze shifted, his expression thoughtful. I've never screwed one, if that's what you're asking. I laughed loudly, the sound echoing in the cavern. No, that's not what I was asking. And for the record, if you refer to our earlier activities as screwing one more time, I'll start calling it. I paused, a wicked grin spreading across my face. Being horse-fucked. That is insulting, he interrupted, his tone indignant. I am no horse. And to say you screwed me isn't? He sighed, the slightest hint of embarrassment creeping into his features. I'm sorry for that. I did not know. So, the humans you've encountered, I said, steering the conversation back. Most of them wanted to harm us, hunt us, turn us into trophies, he said grimly. A few stumbled into our lands by accident, lost and frightened. That's why you reacted the way you did when you first saw me, I said, my hand instinctively reaching out to stroke the velvety softness of his golden coat. He nodded, his expression unreadable. You should get some sleep, he said gently. I shook my head, my teeth chattering slightly. I highly doubt I can fall asleep like this. I think I'll turn into an ice cube by morning. He meets my gaze, his eyes glinting with mischief. If you bend over that boulder, he says, his voice low and smooth, I can warm you from the inside out. His smirk widened slightly. But you'll need to strip out of these wet clothes first. He pauses, watching me intently, before adding, what do you say? I take a moment, letting the silence hang in the air, my lips curving into a teasing smile. I say. I drag out the words for dramatic effect, relishing the playful tension. It's an offer I couldn't possibly refuse. My smirk mirrors his, full of challenge. Bend me over, stud. I let out a light giggle, my fingers working swiftly to peel off my clothes, standing before him completely exposed to his gaze. Chapter 6. I climb onto the towering boulder, leaning forward and parting myself with my hands, a deliberate display of teasing surrender. Eager, aren't we? He remarks, his voice rich with amusement as he steps closer. In one smooth motion, his powerful front legs rise, resting on the boulder as he looms over me, his presence both commanding and electrifying. There was a pause, a heartbeat when the world seemed to hold its breath, before his powerful body pressed closer, the sensation both grounding and electrifying. The heat radiating from him seemed to seep into me, and I shivered, not from cold but from the anticipation of his touch. His breath ghosted over my skin, sending shivers racing along my spine. Every movement, every moment, was a tantalizing tease, a deliberate reminder of the power he held and the pleasure he promised. The warmth of his presence pressed closer, his body an overwhelming force of strength and heat. My breath hitched as I felt him align with me, the connection igniting something primal, an unspoken understanding passing between us. His movements were deliberate, unhurried as if savoring the moment. The smooth glide of his strength against me sent shivers cascading down my spine, my fingers gripping the surface beneath me to steady myself. I gasped softly as he entered, the sensation both foreign and exhilarating, each motion measured and deliberate. He filled me completely, a union of power and grace that made my body tremble in response. Zephyr's breath came in low, ragged exhales, his restraint palpable as he moved. Each push and pull sent waves of pleasure coursing through me, my body yielding to him as though it had always been meant to. Are you okay? He asked softly, his voice holding an edge of tenderness that made my chest tighten. Yes, I whispered, my voice unsteady, laced with both need and awe. He quickened his pace slightly, the rhythm building like the beat of a distant drum, powerful and intoxicating. My body moved with his, instinctively matching his tempo, my surroundings fading as the moment consumed us. Every movement spoke of connection, an unspoken bond that seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. His rhythm became more confident, his movements a masterful blend of power and control. Each shift sent a surge of warmth radiating through me, leaving my breath shallow and my mind untethered. The sound of his breaths, deep and measured, blended with the rhythmic connection of our bodies, creating a symphony that echoed in the quiet wilderness around us. You feel incredible, he murmured, his voice low and rough, the words vibrating through me as much as the movement itself. A soft moan escaped my lips, unbidden but impossible to suppress, as he angled himself at my arm, finding a depth that made my body arch instinctively. My fingers dug into the boulder beneath me, the cool surface grounding me against the heat coursing between us. Zephyr's movements slowed for a moment, his strength palpable as he held himself within me, still and steady, as though savoring the closeness. Tell me. Do you trust me? I swallowed hard, the raw intimacy in his tone making my heart race. Yes, I answered, my voice barely audible, but I knew he heard it. With that, his pace resumed, pushing himself completely inside me, each movement purposeful and full of intent, his strength enveloping me completely. The tension within me coiled tighter, building into something overwhelming, as though the very earth beneath us could feel the weight of what was happening. Zephyr's name slipped from my lips, a quiet plea wrapped in a breathless moan, as my body surrendered to the crescendo building within me. His movements slowed before he pulled out, the intensity giving way to something gentler, almost reverent. He lowered his hooves from the boulder and traced soothing patterns along my back and waist with his hands, his touch a tender contrast to the power he'd just shown. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I leaned into him, my body trembling from the aftershocks of our union. He rested his forehead against my shoulder, his breaths heavy yet steadying. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was filled with something unspoken yet deeply understood. As the world around us stilled, he shifted, gently pulling me upright, his arms strong and steady as they enveloped me. His warmth seeped into my skin, grounding me as the cool night air kissed the sweat lingering on my body. Zephyr, I whispered, my voice barely audible as I tilted my head to look up at him. His hazelnut eyes met mine, their depth pulling me in. Yes? He murmured, his tone softer now, the teasing edge replaced by something deeper. Can I stay? The words spilled out before I could second-guess them. Here. With you? He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I feared I'd said too much, exposed too much, but then his lips curved into a faint smile. Yes, he said simply, the single word carrying a weight that made my heart ache. Relief washed over me, and I melted into his embrace, my head resting against the broad expanse of his chest. His hands stroked my hair, his touch gentle as though he feared breaking the moment. You're safe here, he said quietly, his voice a soothing rumble. I promise. I will protect you. I closed my eyes, my body sinking further into his warmth. Thank you. For allowing me to stay. His heartbeat, strong and steady, became my lullaby, the rhythm easing the tension from my mind. As sleep began to claim me, I felt his chin rest lightly against the top of my head, his arms tightening around me protectively. The last thing I remembered was the sound of his breath, slow and even, mingling with the faint trickle of the waterfall in the distance. And then, sleep stole us both, wrapped in each other's presence, as if the world beyond this moment no longer mattered. The end.